Apache mother forced her daughter to marry a cowboy. But when she found her pregnant Wild West story, Marisol had grown up surrounded by the wide, golden stretches of the Arizona desert. The sun would rise over the red cliffs in the morning, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, and she loved watching the light play across the rugged landscape. Life in her small Apache community had always been simple, yet full of lessons. From a young age, she had been taught to respect the earth, to notice the smallest signs of weather, and to move quietly through the land with the patience and care of her ancestors. She had learned to identify the plants that could heal a scrape, the tracks of animals in the sand, and the quiet ways of listening to the wind to understand what lay beyond the hills. Despite this rich connection to nature, Marisol's life was also tightly controlled by her mother, Nayeli. Nayeli was a strong woman, known in the village for her wisdom and sharp mind. But she could also be unyielding, especially when it came to family matters. She carried the heavy weight of responsibility for her household and was determined to protect her daughter from the dangers she believed lurked beyond their territory. Nayeli often spoke of the encroaching settlers and the unpredictable lives of cowboys who rode through the lands, warning that Marisol would need stability, protection, and a husband who could provide security. Marisol understood her mother's concern, but she often felt trapped. She admired her mother's strength, but wished for a life where she could make her own choices. She dreamed of walking freely through the hills without worrying about every step, of laughing with friends late into the evening around the fire, and, perhaps, of one day finding someone she could love naturally without pressure or duty. These dreams seemed distant, sometimes impossible, under the shadow of her mother's plans. One evening, after the last fire had burned low and the stars stretched endlessly across the desert sky, Nayeli came to Marisol with news that would change her life. A cowboy named Jedediah Carter had arrived in the area. He was said to be skilled with cattle, hardworking, and respected among the few settlers in the region. Nayeli had met him briefly when he passed through, and she believed he could provide what she considered a safe and respectable future for her daughter. Without giving Marisol much choice, Nayeli insisted that a marriage be arranged. Marisol felt a mixture of emotions: fear, confusion, and even a small spark of curiosity. She had heard stories of cowboys from her neighbors, some brave and kind, others rough and unpredictable. Jed, from what she knew, seemed quieter than most, but she had never spoken to him at length. The thought of marrying someone she barely knew made her stomach twist with worry. Yet when she looked into her mother's eyes, she saw determination. Nayeli would not be persuaded otherwise. In the following days, preparations for the marriage began. The community, while quiet, was aware of the arrangement. Some offered their support, knowing the importance of family alliances, while others exchanged hesitant glances, understanding the pressure Marisol faced. The elders advised patience and acceptance, emphasizing the ways of tradition and duty. Even in the midst of uncertainty, Marisol could not help but notice the beauty of her surroundings. The desert was alive with colors that shifted with every passing hour, and the sounds of nature, birds singing in the morning, coyotes howling at night, the soft rush of wind through the sagebrush, reminded her of the world beyond worry. When Marisol finally met Jed in person, she found him surprisingly different from what she had imagined. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to hold both gentleness and careful observation. He spoke politely, never rushing, and listened with an unexpected attentiveness. Still, the thought of spending her life with him made her uneasy. She could not yet understand what it would mean to leave her family, her familiar hills, and her friends to live in a cabin on the edge of the frontier. The wedding day arrived quietly, with the desert itself seeming to hold its breath. It was not a grand event, but it carried deep meaning. Nayeli had insisted on certain traditional Apache rituals to honor the family's heritage and to bless the new union. Marisol wore a dress made from soft, woven fabric, decorated with patterns passed down through generations, while Jed wore simple attire suitable for the rugged life he led. The ceremony took place near a small creek, where the sun shimmered off the water and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. As they exchanged vows, Marisol's heart was heavy with uncertainty. She repeated the words she had been taught to say, yet her mind wandered to the life she had left behind, to the laughter of her friends, and to the quiet evenings she had once enjoyed with her family. She wondered what it would be like to share her life with someone she barely knew, and whether she would ever feel the comfort of love in this arranged union. Jed, on the other hand, seemed calm and respectful. He did not attempt to dominate or frighten her, which eased her tension slightly, though it did not completely remove the fear that had settled in her chest. After the ceremony, the couple shared a simple meal with Nayeli and a few close community members. The conversation was polite, often cautious, as everyone felt the weight of tradition pressing on the young bride. Marisol noticed how her mother's eyes watched her closely, measuring every word, every gesture. It was clear that Nayeli's primary concern was ensuring her daughter's obedience and safety, rather than her happiness. The thought brought both sadness and determination to Marisol's heart. She would need to navigate this new life carefully, balancing her own desires with the expectations placed upon her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and fiery reds, Marisol and Jed rode together toward his homestead. The journey was quiet, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Marisol felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She was leaving her childhood home, stepping into a life she could not yet predict. But the vastness of the land reminded her that perhaps there was room for growth even within the constraints of her mother's plan. That night, under a blanket of stars, Marisol reflected on the choices she had been given, or rather, the lack of them. She thought of the strength she had inherited from her mother, the skills she had learned from her community, and the resilience that had been woven into her very being. She realized that, while she could not control the circumstances that had brought her here, she could control how she faced them. In that quiet moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She would survive. She would adapt, and she would find a way to create a life that honored both her heritage and her own spirit. The desert night was peaceful, yet alive with subtle sounds. The whisper of the wind through the sage, the distant call of an owl, and the soft rustle of small creatures moving through the sand. Marisol listened closely, feeling a connection to the land that reminded her she was not truly alone. Even as uncertainty loomed over her future, the natural world seemed to offer guidance, strength, and comfort. In those early hours, Marisol understood that her journey was just beginning. She would need courage, patience, and careful observation to navigate this new life with Jed. The road ahead would not be easy, but she also sensed that there were moments of beauty and connection waiting for her, if she could find the right balance between her own voice and the expectations of those around her. By the time dawn painted the sky with soft pinks and golds, Marisol felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She had stepped into the unknown, but she carried with her the wisdom of her people, the guidance of her mother, and the strength she had learned from her own experiences. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to face. And as the sun rose, spilling light across the desert landscape, Marisol realized that perhaps this new chapter of her life, however challenging, could also hold unexpected joys, connections, and opportunities for growth. Marisol's first days in Jed's homestead were filled with a mix of wonder and nervousness. The cabin stood at the edge of a wide plain, where the land seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. It was smaller and simpler than the adobe home she had known in her village, but it had a sturdy charm. Wooden beams held up the roof, a stone fireplace sat at the center, and a few handmade furnishings offered basic comfort. The smell of wood smoke and fresh hay mingled in the air, a constant reminder of the life she was stepping into, a life of hard work, simplicity, and quiet routines. Jed was patient with her as she adjusted. He showed her how to carry water from the nearby stream without spilling it, how to feed the animals in the barn, and even the best way to keep the fire going in the fireplace. Marisol noticed that he had a quiet respect for her abilities. Whenever she learned something new, he encouraged her with small, approving nods or a word of praise. Though their conversations were brief at first, there was a growing sense of understanding between them. She began to notice that Jed, though not like the men she had heard about in stories, had a steady kindness that was rare in such a harsh frontier world. Life on the homestead was not easy. Every day required energy, patience, and focus. Marisol spent mornings gathering water and preparing meals over the fire. Afternoons were often devoted to helping Jed with chores, mending fences, feeding the animals, or tending small crops. In the evenings, they worked together to repair tools or prepare for the next day. At first, Marisol's hands were sore, her muscles tired, and her spirit heavy with homesickness. She missed her friends, the familiar laughter of her village, and the comforting guidance of her mother. Yet slowly, she began to see the rhythms of life here as both challenging and fascinating. One morning, as she carried a bucket of water from the stream, Marisol spotted a small group of Apache women nearby, picking herbs and tending to their small gardens. Her heart lifted. They were neighbors from her own people who lived not far from the homestead, careful to keep their distance from the settlers but willing to share wisdom with someone from their community. She approached them cautiously, unsure how they would react. The women welcomed her warmly. They offered gentle smiles and quiet encouragement, sharing stories of the land, the seasons, and the ways to care for plants, animals, and family. They taught her about natural remedies for minor injuries, herbs for health, and the ways of moving silently and confidently through the desert. Marisol felt a deep connection to them, a reminder that she was not truly alone, that even in a strange and challenging place, her heritage and her people were close enough to guide her. Jed, too, began to reveal more of himself during these days. He told Marisol stories of his life as a cowboy, the long journeys across the plains, the hard work of managing cattle, and the quiet joys of evenings spent watching sunsets or tending to the animals. She listened carefully, surprised by his gentle humor and thoughtful observations. She learned that he, too, had experienced loneliness and uncertainty, and that he valued companionship in ways that were often hidden beneath his quiet exterior. Slowly, a bond began to form between them, built not on passion or excitement, but on respect, trust, and the shared effort of daily life. Despite these small comforts, Marisol often struggled with the sense of isolation. The homestead was far from any town or settlement, and the vast, open landscape could feel overwhelming. She missed the familiar sounds of her village, children laughing, the rhythmic drumming during celebrations, and the voices of her friends calling across the courtyard. Nights were especially difficult. As the wind blew through the plain, she sometimes felt a pang of fear, imagining dangers lurking in the darkness. Yet, even in these moments, she reminded herself of the skills she had learned from her people, the ability to observe, adapt, and find strength in patience. One afternoon, while tending to the small garden near the cabin, Marisol noticed Jed watching her from a distance. She was planting seeds for vegetables, careful to space them correctly, and arranging herbs in neat rows. Jed approached quietly, carrying a small bundle of tools and a basket of fresh eggs from the chicken coop. He offered them to her with a simple smile, saying, I thought these might help." Marisol felt a small warmth in her chest. These small gestures, simple yet thoughtful, made her feel seen and appreciated in a way she had not expected. As the weeks passed, Marisol began to adjust to the routines of life on the frontier. She learned to wake early with the sun, to move quietly and efficiently, and to anticipate the needs of both the animals and the cabin. She also started keeping a small journal, writing down her thoughts, observations, and dreams. Through writing, she found a way to process her feelings, to honor her experiences, and to remind herself that she was capable, strong, and resilient. During this time, she discovered that living with Jed was not as frightening as she had initially imagined. They shared meals in silence at times, but other times they laughed together, traded stories, or discussed plans for the garden. Jed taught her how to mend fences and build small structures, while Marisol showed him how to identify herbs and plants useful for cooking and health. The exchange of knowledge became a bridge between their worlds, helping her feel a sense of belonging in a place that had once seemed foreign and intimidating. Marisol also began to observe the land in new ways. She noticed the patterns of birds and animals, the way clouds shifted before a change in weather, and the subtle movements of the wind through the tall grasses. Every day offered lessons in patience, observation, and adaptability. Even the smallest achievements, seeing the first sprout of a planted seed, fixing a broken fence, or successfully guiding a calf, brought her pride and a growing sense of competence. Despite these moments of growth, Marisol could not fully escape the weight of her situation. She often reflected on her mother's intentions, trying to understand the balance between protection and control. Nayeli had believed she was ensuring safety and security, yet Marisol sometimes felt the pressure of expectation pressing down on her chest. She realized that part of her journey would involve navigating these expectations while also carving out her own sense of identity, independence, and voice. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the distant hills, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Marisol and Jed sat together outside the cabin. The air was cool, and the sounds of the desert were alive. The distant call of a bird, the rustle of leaves, the soft whistle of the wind. Jed spoke quietly about his plans for the next few weeks, building a new pen for the animals, repairing a section of fence, and preparing for the upcoming season. Marisol listened, adding her suggestions and asking questions. She realized that she was no longer simply following instructions. She was contributing, learning, and becoming a part of this life. In that quiet moment, Marisol felt a small but significant shift within herself. She understood that life on the frontier would always have challenges, that days would be long and hard, and that homesickness would sometimes return. Yet she also recognized that there was room for growth, connection, and even joy. The bond she was forming with Jed, though quiet and gradual, gave her a sense of partnership. The support and guidance of the neighboring Apache women reminded her of her roots and her own strength, learned from years of living in her village, provided her with the courage to face the unknown. Marisol began to see the homestead not as a cage, but as a new landscape filled with lessons, opportunities, and quiet wonders. She could walk through the fields with purpose, tend to the animals with care, and participate in the slow rhythm of frontier life with confidence. Every day she grew stronger, more observant, and more capable of balancing the expectations of others with her own sense of self. As weeks turned into months, the relationship between Marisol and Jed continued to develop. It was not marked by dramatic displays of emotion, but by subtle gestures of care, respect, and shared responsibility. Jed learned to appreciate Marisol's knowledge of the land, her attentiveness, and her quiet wisdom. Marisol, in turn, began to see Jed not as a stranger or a figure of obligation, but as someone capable of partnership, trust, and understanding. The homestead, once a place of uncertainty and isolation, became a space where she could learn, grow, and contribute meaningfully to life in the Wild West. Through it all, Marisol never forgot the lessons of her childhood, the importance of observation, patience, and resilience. She continued to watch the movements of the land, to honor the changing seasons, and to find beauty in even the simplest moments. The first bloom of a flower, the quiet flight of a bird, or the soft warmth of the morning sun. Each day added layers to her understanding of life, love, and adaptation, and she realized that even in circumstances she had not chosen, she could find meaning, connection, and strength. By the time the first hints of spring appeared across the plain, Marisol had settled into a rhythm that balanced work, observation, learning, and moments of quiet reflection. She had learned to respect the land, to navigate the routines of homestead life, and to appreciate the small gestures of kindness and care from Jed. Though the journey ahead was still uncertain, she now felt a growing confidence in her ability to face it with resilience, patience, and a quiet determination. Spring had arrived across the plains, painting the fields in soft shades of green. Marisol moved through her daily routines with growing confidence, tending the animals, planting seeds in the garden, and learning to manage the homestead alongside Jed. Life had become a rhythm, a mixture of labor, observation, and quiet moments of reflection. She had begun to feel that, despite the challenges, she was finding her place in this world, slowly building a life that balanced her own needs with the expectations placed upon her. It was during one of these mornings, as Marisol carried water from the stream to the cabin, that she first noticed something unusual about her body. At first she thought it was simply fatigue from the long days of work. Her hands ached, her back was sore, and she felt lighter-headed than usual. Yet, over the next few days, a quiet sense of awareness grew inside her. Something was changing, something important. The realization dawned slowly, almost like the first light of morning across the plains. Marisol was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of emotions. At first, there was surprise, a sudden awareness that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. Then came a wave of concern. How would Jed react? How would her mother respond if she found out? And, more than anything, how would she navigate this new chapter in a place that was already challenging and unfamiliar? Despite the worry, Marisol also felt a quiet spark of wonder. The thought of new life, of a child growing within her, brought an unexpected joy, a sense of connection to the future that she had not anticipated. When Jed returned from tending to the cattle that evening, Marisol struggled with how to tell him. They had grown close over the months, sharing small moments of understanding and trust. But this was different. It was not about chores or lessons in the land. It was about a life that would connect them forever. She waited until the evening, when the sky had turned soft shades of pink and gold, and the animals had settled quietly in the pens. Sitting together on a wooden bench outside the cabin, Marisol took a deep breath and spoke. Jed listened carefully as she explained, his expression calm at first, then shifting to a quiet smile. He reached out and held her hand gently, saying nothing for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, not with surprise or fear, but with a sense of shared responsibility. "We will face this together," he said. "Whatever comes, we will find a way." Marisol felt a mixture of relief and warmth. In that moment, she realized that the bond between them, built slowly through daily effort and shared life, was strong enough to withstand even this unexpected news. However, the greatest challenge was yet to come. Marisol knew she had to tell her mother. Nayeli had always been a force of guidance and control in her life, and she would want to be involved. But Nayeli's reactions could be unpredictable. Some part of Marisol feared anger, disappointment, or even judgment. Yet she also knew that honesty was necessary. The next morning she prepared herself for the journey back to her mother's small home, taking with her not only the news but the quiet courage she had nurtured over months of life on the frontier. When Nayeli saw her daughter approaching, she could sense that something was different. Marisol's eyes held a seriousness that demanded attention. Without waiting for small talk, Marisol explained that she was pregnant, speaking slowly, clearly, and with as much courage as she could muster. Nayeli's eyes widened, and for a moment, the air between them was thick with silence. Then came a rush of emotion, concern, worry, and perhaps a hint of relief that Marisol had not faced this alone. At first, Nayeli's reaction was stern. She reminded Marisol of the responsibility she would now carry and the challenges of raising a child in a frontier world. She spoke of the dangers, the long days, and the hardships that life would bring. Marisol listened quietly, acknowledging her mother's wisdom while also asserting her own resolve. "I understand, Mother," she said, "but I am not alone. Jed and I will care for this child, and I will make choices that honor both my family and my life here." Nayeli's gaze softened slightly, though the tension remained. It was clear that understanding and acceptance would take time, patience, and demonstration of responsibility. In the following weeks, life shifted for Marisol. Her body began to change, and she learned to listen carefully to its needs. She rested more often, adjusted her routines, and began preparing for the new life that would soon join her. Jed remained supportive, helping her carry loads, tending to chores that might strain her, and ensuring that the homestead remained organized and safe. Their partnership deepened, no longer just a matter of shared labor, but a shared journey into the future. They spoke often about the child, discussing names, hopes, and the lessons they would teach. Each conversation, though simple, strengthened the bond between them and gave Marisol a sense of confidence and purpose. The Apache women in the nearby community also played a quiet, guiding role. They offered advice on preparing for childbirth, caring for both mother and child, and balancing responsibilities. Marisol visited them frequently, gathering knowledge and practical skills, as well as emotional support. These women reminded her of the strength of her heritage and the importance of resilience, patience, and adaptability. They taught her not only practical skills, but also the emotional courage to navigate this new chapter with dignity and care. As the months passed, Marisol faced moments of doubt. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, tired, and uncertain about the future. The homestead, though a place of stability, could sometimes feel isolating, and she missed the familiarity of her village. Yet each challenge also became an opportunity for growth. She learned to trust her own instincts, to communicate her needs clearly, and to rely on the partnership she was building with Jed. Small victories, such as successfully preparing a meal or completing a task she had once found daunting, reinforced her sense of capability. Jed, too, learned and adapted. He became attentive not only to the physical demands of supporting Marisol, but also to her emotional well-being. He listened without judgment, offered quiet encouragement, and celebrated small milestones with her. His respect for her knowledge, skills, and resilience grew, and Marisol began to see in him a partner who was willing to walk beside her through challenges rather than simply dictate solutions. One evening, as Marisol rested outside the cabin watching the sun sink behind the hills, she felt a sense of profound connection. The plains stretched endlessly, the wind whispered through the grasses, and the sky glowed with a quiet beauty that seemed to mirror the changes in her life. She realized that despite the uncertainty, the challenges, and the pressures of tradition, she was not alone. She had Jed by her side, the support of her community, and the strength within herself that had carried her through every challenge before. She also thought of her child, growing quietly within her, a new life that symbolized hope, continuity, and the blending of worlds. The child would inherit not only the Apache traditions and wisdom, but also the resilience and adaptability required to live on the frontier. Marisol felt a swell of pride and determination. She knew that the months ahead would require patience, care, and courage, but she also understood that she could rise to meet these demands. As the first signs of summer appeared, Marisol and Jed worked together to prepare the homestead for the future. They repaired fences, tended to crops, and organized spaces to ensure that everything would be ready when the child arrived. Every task was approached with care, not as a burden but as a shared effort that strengthened their partnership. Through these days, Marisol discovered that responsibility, though sometimes heavy, could also bring clarity, purpose, and a deeper understanding of one's own strength. In quiet moments, Marisol reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the strict guidance of her mother to the wide-open plains of the frontier. She thought of the choices she had made, the lessons she had learned, and the resilience she had cultivated. Each experience, no matter how small, had prepared her to face the future with courage, compassion, and awareness. She realized that life, even when unexpected, could offer beauty, connection, and growth when approached with patience and care. By the time the days grew long and the sun warmed the plains with steady heat, Marisol felt a growing confidence in herself and her path. She was no longer simply following the expectations of others. She was actively shaping her own life, preparing for motherhood, and navigating the challenges of frontier life with strength and dignity. The bond with Jed, nurtured through months of shared effort and trust, had deepened into a partnership that promised support, understanding, and companionship. In those quiet, sunlit moments, Marisol understood that life's uncertainties could also be opportunities for growth. The child she carried was a symbol of hope and continuity, bridging generations, cultures, and experiences. Her mother's guidance, though strict at times, had instilled resilience and courage that now carried her through this new chapter. And the connection she was building with Jed promised a shared journey, one that would teach both of them lessons about patience, love, and cooperation. Marisol had faced the first great challenge of her new life on the frontier and emerged with awareness, strength, and a quiet sense of determination. The months ahead would bring more change, more growth, and more responsibility. But she was ready. With the plains stretching endlessly before her, the wind whispering ancient lessons, and the promise of a new life within her, Marisol felt that she was not just surviving, she was beginning to truly live. As summer settled over the plains, Marisol began to feel the gentle but unmistakable changes of pregnancy. She noticed the way her body carried the growing life inside her, the quiet rhythm of a new heartbeat mingling with her own. There were moments of discomfort, to be sure, tiredness, occasional aches, and the need to rest more often, but there was also a growing sense of awe and wonder. She felt a connection not only to the child she carried, but also to the generations of women in her family who had come before her, strong and resilient, navigating life in ways both challenging and inspiring. Jed noticed the changes too. He adapted his routines to support her, carrying heavier loads, attending more closely to the animals, and spending time preparing meals that were both nourishing and easy for Marisol to manage. His quiet attentiveness showed a level of care that went beyond simple duty. Marisol began to see Jed not just as a partner in chores, but as someone who genuinely wanted to share her burdens and joys. Together, they started to plan for the future, not only for themselves, but also for the child who would soon join their lives. Marisol also leaned heavily on the neighboring Apache women, who had become a source of guidance and comfort. They shared knowledge passed down through generations, teaching her ways to care for herself during pregnancy, tips for easing discomfort, and practices to prepare for childbirth. Their lessons were practical, but also deeply rooted in tradition, connecting Marisol to her heritage. Even as she lived in a frontier setting, she learned how to use herbs for gentle relief, how to maintain her strength through proper diet and activity, and how to calm her mind when worry threatened to take hold. One afternoon, Marisol and Jed spent hours together tending to the homestead, planting new crops, fixing fences, and reinforcing the small barn. The work was slower than before, and Jed often encouraged her to rest in the shade of the nearby trees. As they paused to watch the sun lower behind the hills, Jed spoke softly about the life they were building together. "We'll figure this," he said, his eyes fixed on hers. "Every day we learn something new, and soon we'll have someone small to teach, guide, and love." Marisol smiled, feeling a mixture of comfort and excitement. The thought of raising a child alongside Jed, with both of them learning and growing together, made the challenges ahead feel more manageable. As the weeks passed, Marisol's belly grew rounder, and the changes were visible to everyone who saw her. Villagers and neighboring settlers alike offered gentle congratulations and kind words of encouragement. Yet, despite these small gestures of support, Marisol often felt a quiet tension. She knew that her mother, Naeli, still worried deeply. Naeli had visited occasionally, checking on her daughter, asking questions, and offering advice. Sometimes her concern manifested as gentle reminders of responsibility, and other times as subtle cautionary words about the difficulties ahead. Marisol listened carefully, balancing respect for her mother with the determination to make her own decisions. The closer she came to the time of childbirth, the more Marisol began to rely on her own intuition and inner strength. She practiced breathing techniques and learned to stay calm when her mind filled with worry about the unknown. She spent quiet hours alone outside the cabin, listening to the wind, the rustling grasses, and the distant calls of animals. Each sound reminded her of the rhythm of life and the importance of patience. She thought often about the child, imagining small details, the tiny fingers and toes, the soft coos, the way it might react to sunlight or sound. In these moments, Marisol felt a profound sense of purpose and connection that gave her courage. Jed, too, continued to demonstrate patience and kindness. He took on tasks that were once shared, built small comforts for Marisol, and spent time reading quietly by the fire as she rested. They spoke often about hopes for the child's future, discussing values, traditions, and lessons they wanted to pass on. Marisol shared her knowledge of Apache ways, the importance of respect for nature, observation, and quiet strength, while Jed spoke of frontier life, teaching her about survival, hard work, and the rewards of persistence. In blending these teachings, they began to see the unique world their child would inherit, a world of heritage, adaptation, and possibility. Marisol also noticed subtle shifts in her own relationship with Jed. Where before there had been uncertainty, now there was trust. Where there had been distance, now there was companionship. They shared small rituals, preparing meals together, walking through the fields at sunset, and exchanging stories of family and childhood. Each moment, though simple, deepened their connection. Marisol realized that the love they were building was quiet, steady, and resilient, shaped not by grand gestures but by daily acts of care, respect, and shared responsibility. The homestead itself seemed to reflect these changes. New growth in the garden mirrored the growth within Marisol, while repairs and improvements to the cabin mirrored the care and planning they were investing in their family. Even the animals seemed more settled, as if sensing the calm and steady rhythm that now guided life on the plains. Marisol took note of these small signs, seeing them as reminders that life, though unpredictable, could also be balanced and nurturing when approached with intention and care. One late afternoon, as Marisol sat near the stream watching the water ripple over stones, she felt the first gentle movements of her child. It was a quiet, fluttering sensation that filled her with wonder and tenderness. She placed a hand over her belly, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay." Jed joined her soon after, kneeling beside her and placing his hand over hers. They sat in silence, watching the sun turn the sky into shades of pink and gold, feeling the quiet miracle of life within her. The connection between mother, child, and partner felt complete in that moment, a circle of love, responsibility, and hope. As the weeks continued, Marisol made careful preparations for the arrival of her child. She organized a small space in the cabin, gathering soft cloths, blankets, and basic necessities. She consulted often with the Apache women, learning ways to support the child's first days, from gentle soothing to practical care. Jed helped wherever he could, building simple furniture, creating storage spaces, and ensuring the homestead was as comfortable and safe as possible. Together, they transformed their home into a welcoming space filled with warmth, thoughtfulness, and quiet anticipation. Throughout these months, Marisol also reflected on her own personal growth. She recognized the strength she had cultivated, the lessons she had learned from both her mother and her heritage, and the resilience she had discovered within herself. She had navigated uncertainty, embraced change, and faced new responsibilities with courage and clarity. Her relationship with Jed had grown into a partnership rooted in respect, communication, and shared goals. And above all, she felt a deep sense of connection to the child she carried, a new life that would embody hope, continuity, and the blending of two worlds. As the day of childbirth approached, Marisol felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. She understood that the months ahead would demand patience, care, and focus, but she also felt ready. She had support, knowledge, and an inner strength that had carried her through previous challenges. She spent her final days before the birth preparing emotionally, mentally, and physically, walking through the fields, talking quietly to her child, and sharing stories with Jed. These moments of reflection strengthened her, helping her feel grounded and confident in her ability to face the changes ahead. On the morning that the first signs of labor appeared, Marisol awoke with a sense of quiet determination. She and Jed moved through the familiar routines with care, adjusting tasks and focusing on comfort and preparation. The sun rose over the plains, bathing the land in soft light, and Marisol felt a sense of peace. She was not afraid. She knew that the journey of motherhood would bring challenges, yes, but also immense joy, connection, and growth. Happy, dead. Together with Jed, she would face this next chapter, confident in their partnership, the support of their community, and the strength they had cultivated over months of shared life. As the day unfolded, Marisol felt ready to welcome her child into the world. She remembered the lessons of patience and observation she had learned from her heritage, the guidance and kindness of Jed, and the wisdom of the Apache women who had prepared her. Every heartbeat, every movement, and every breath reminded her of the miracle of life and the love that had brought them to this point. In the quiet strength of the plains, surrounded by family, tradition, and partnership, Marisol knew that life was about to change in the most beautiful and meaningful way imaginable. The morning sun stretched across the plains, spilling golden light over the cabin and fields. Marisol awoke with a quiet, steady sense of anticipation. She could feel that the moment she had prepared for so long had arrived. Her body, strengthened by months of care, patience, and attention, was ready to bring new life into the world. Jed, sensing her calm determination, moved quietly beside her, ready to support her in every way he could. They shared a glance, one of understanding and connection, knowing that this day would mark a turning point not only in their lives, but in the history of their small homestead. As labor began, Marisol focused on her breathing, remembering the lessons the Apache women had taught her. Slow, deliberate breaths, awareness of the body, and calm focus on each sensation. Jed stayed close, offering gentle words of encouragement, adjusting blankets and making sure she had water and comfort. The cabin was quiet except for the soft sounds of movement and the occasional chirp of birds outside, creating a calm, supportive atmosphere. Marisol felt a wave of strength rise within her. This was not just about bringing a child into the world. It was about resilience, partnership, and the continuity of life itself. Hours passed with steady, measured effort. Marisol drew on the knowledge of generations, the skills Jed had helped her develop, and her own determination to face each moment with courage. She spoke quietly to her child, whispering words of love and assurance. Jed, too, spoke softly, telling her that she was strong, capable, and that they would face everything together. The air seemed filled with anticipation, not only from the imminent birth, but also from the collective support of the land, the home, and the traditions that had guided Marisol to this point. Finally, as the sun reached its highest point, a small cry filled the cabin. Their daughter had arrived, healthy and alert, her tiny fingers curling around the first breath of life. Marisol held her close, feeling an overwhelming sense of love, relief, and connection. Jed stood beside her, awe and pride reflected in his eyes as he gently touched his daughter's tiny hand. In that moment, the months of preparation, patience, and learning all came together. The homestead, the plains, and the skies themselves seemed to share in the quiet celebration of new life. Marisol spent the following days caring for her daughter, learning each of her unique rhythms, moods, and needs. Jed took on tasks with a quiet devotion, ensuring that Marisol could rest, eat, and regain strength. He learned how to soothe their child, how to recognize her signals, and how to contribute fully to her care. The bond among the three of them grew stronger with each passing day, built on patience, observation, and shared responsibility. The cabin, once simply a place of shelter, had become a home filled with warmth, love, and the promise of a future shaped by care and understanding. The neighboring Apache women visited, bringing food, advice, and support. They showed Marisol how to swaddle the baby gently, how to prepare herbal remedies for minor discomforts, and how to nurture the baby's spirit through quiet attention and touch. Marisol absorbed their teachings eagerly, feeling grateful for the knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Each visit reminded her of the strength and resilience of her heritage, reinforcing the sense that her child was connected not only to her and Jed, but also to a lineage of wisdom, love, and survival. As weeks turned into months, Marisol began to see how her daughter would inherit a unique blend of worlds. From Marisol, she would learn respect for nature, the lessons of observation and patience, and the quiet strength of Apache traditions. From Jed, she would learn about the rhythms of frontier life, the value of persistence, and the joy of shared work and partnership. Together, Marisol and Jed nurtured their daughter in a way that combined the best of both cultures, creating a foundation for a life filled with learning, respect, and love. The child grew quickly, her laughter and curiosity bringing joy and energy to the homestead. Marisol marveled at the way she explored the small garden, reaching for plants and observing insects with wide-eyed wonder. Jed would often pick up the child, showing her the animals and teaching her simple lessons about the land. These moments, small and seemingly ordinary, created memories that Marisol knew would last a lifetime. The homestead, once a place of survival and routine, had become a vibrant space of growth, exploration, and family connection. Even Nayeli, Marisol's mother, began to see the beauty and strength in her daughter's choices. She observed from a distance, occasionally visiting to offer guidance and support, and slowly her initial concerns gave way to quiet pride. She could see that Marisol had grown into a capable, confident mother and partner, blending tradition with adaptability. Nayeli's respect for her daughter deepened, and the tension that had once existed between them softened into understanding and mutual care. The circle of family, both immediate and extended, felt complete in its quiet resilience. Marisol also reflected on her own journey, the steps that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the strict guidance of her mother, the initial uncertainty of marriage, the challenges of learning to live with Jed, and the slow, careful development of trust and partnership. She understood that each moment, each decision, and each act of patience had shaped her into the person she had become, a mother, a partner, and a woman capable of navigating change with strength and grace. Jed, too, looked at the life they had built together with pride. He saw Marisol's growth and resilience, the gentle but firm way she guided their child, and the love that filled their home. Their partnership had matured into a balance of respect, care, and shared responsibility. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and the ongoing joy of seeing their child thrive. In this life, Jed found not only purpose, but also a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they were facing the world together as a family. As the years passed, Marisol continued to nurture her daughter, teaching her the values of observation, patience, and respect for the land. She shared stories of their heritage, of life in the village, and of the lessons learned on the frontier. Jed contributed lessons of practical skills, courage, and persistence. Together they created a space where their child could learn, grow, and develop into a strong, thoughtful individual, capable of understanding and appreciating both worlds she had inherited. Marisol also took moments to reflect on her own dreams and desires. She realized that while the life she had entered was not of her choosing, she had transformed it into something meaningful. The forced marriage had become a partnership. The challenges of frontier life had become lessons in resilience, and the birth of her child had become a source of purpose and joy. She understood that life was not always about the circumstances she faced, but about the choices she made, the connections she nurtured, and the strength she found within herself. The plains, the cabin, and the small homestead became symbols of growth, adaptation, and the blending of worlds. Marisol's life, once limited by expectation and uncertainty, had become rich with experience, connection, and love. She watched as her daughter ran through the fields, laughed with Jed, and listened attentively to stories of both Apache traditions and frontier survival. Each day offered new lessons, opportunities for growth, and moments of quiet joy. By the time her daughter was old enough to walk steadily and speak her first words, Marisol realized that the story of their family was one of resilience, partnership, and hope. She had taken what could have been a life defined by obligation and fear and transformed it into a life defined by love, learning, and growth. Jed had become more than a husband. He had become a true partner, someone who shared not only responsibilities but also dreams and hopes. The child, a living embodiment of both heritage and adaptability, was a reminder of what could be achieved through patience, care, and dedication. Marisol often sat outside at dusk, watching the sun set over the plains, feeling the gentle presence of her family nearby. The wind carried the quiet sounds of the land, the soft rustle of grasses, the distant calls of animals, and the calm whisper of the evening breeze. In those moments, she reflected on her journey, the guidance of her mother, the initial uncertainty of marriage, the slow building of trust and partnership, and the miracle of new life. She understood that life was a series of lessons, each one shaping her, teaching her, and offering opportunities for growth and love. In the quiet of the evening, with her daughter resting and Jed nearby, Marisol felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that she had created a life that honored both her heritage and the realities of frontier living. She had faced uncertainty, navigated challenges, and embraced responsibility with courage. And in doing so, she had built a home filled with warmth, love, and resilience, a home where future generations could thrive, learn, and grow. Marisol's journey from a young girl guided by her mother's strict expectations to a confident mother and partner was a testament to strength, adaptability, and the power of love. She had learned that life's challenges could be transformed into opportunities, that connection and care were powerful tools, and that even in the most unexpected circumstances, joy and fulfillment could be found. The plains stretched endlessly around them, the cabin stood as a symbol of their shared life, and Marisol knew that together they had created something enduring, meaningful, and beautiful.